Are you being able to see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So one of you can just let me know what have you learned till now in this course, just to get a feedback from you. Any one of you. Maybe Vinay.
Yes, sir.
Hmm. What have you learned till now? What has madam taught till now in this
Then
course?
how the pipelining, different kinds of modeling.
Right.
Then how the processor pipelining, etc. How the processor is behaving. Then the communication protocol.
Okay. Okay. And concurrent processes, etc. No. Hmm. Pipelining. So essentially, you have learned architecture and pipelining. You have learned about communication protocols. I think you have learned the CAN protocol, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes. And before that, you have learned modeling.
Yes, sir.
So let me wait for just 2-3 more minutes. Right. So let me start. Just once more, you tell that you can hear me.
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Yeah. Right.
Yes, sir. I can hear you.
So the rough plan for this part of the course is that I'll start with hardware software co-design and optimization, which is the topic of this slide today. And from which I will move to uh, task scheduling and mapping techniques. And then further, I'll go into real-time operating system design and then real-time scheduling principles, followed by performance validation techniques, worst case execution time estimation of programs, of C programs, in the presence of memory, in the presence of communication protocols. How do you estimate the performance of a given design, embedded software design? And further, we will complete the course with verification techniques, software, your formal verification techniques related to embedded systems design. Okay. So let me start with hardware software co-design and optimization. To begin with, as we have been seeing this, we have seen this figure multiple times in this course already. The objective of what we are studying here is to come up with the design of the cyber part of a physical system or the. So now the cyber part will be controlling. We are concerned with the design of the cyber part, which will control this physical system. The physical system could be um, the brake of a car, could be a lift, could be any physical system, an electromechanical system. It will be controlled. So inputs of that physical system. So the physical system will provide physical inputs through its physical interface. For example, as I took this example earlier as well, could be the speed of the wheels of a car. So therefore the physical interface would be the wheel of the car, from which the sensor would calculate the speed of the car, right? So that speed will be a sensed physical input from the plant. Now based on that, the objective is to design a control system that will control the physical system in the way I want. So for the case of a cruise control system, adaptive cruise control system, I may want that if the road is completely clear, I should be maintaining the speed of my car at stable 60 kilometers per hour. If there is an obstacle, I should be able to quickly slow down the car within a certain distance in front of the obstacle. Right? So this is how I want to control the speed of the car, and hence for that I require a cyber system. The cyber system in a cyber physical system actually is composed of two subsystems or subcomponents: the computation subcomponent and the communication subcomponent. The computation subcomponent will be composed of multiple processing platforms on which functionalities or tasks associated with the computation system is going to run. For example, in this figure we see two processing platforms, platform 1 and platform 2, on which 3 tasks or computations are running. And then this computation is not on the same platform, they are on 2 different platforms, and hence to perform the entire for the design of the entire control system together, which will control the physical plant, I also need an intervening network, because there are 2 platforms and which must communicate within themselves. Now the cyber physical system in general is very the definition is in general is very general. The definition is very general. It could be the two processors within a car communicating through a CAN network or a time sensitive network, or it could be 2 network nodes in a LAN system, and the network could be the LAN. So the times and the accuracy related to the communication, the real-time accuracy and the latency requirement and the types of applications which you can map on such platforms are going to differ. But in general, the cyber physical system will define it uniformly in the same way. So the physical plant is providing again, so the physical plant is providing physical inputs which are sensed by the sensors, computation happening, and then the output is merged, and then you generate actuator, and the actuator is controlling, let us say, the throttle of the engine in the car, which will be able to control the speed in the way that is desired. Okay. So this is in general the view of the cyber physical system. Now, as we told before in the introductory slide also, that when we have so how do we come up to such a cyber system for the physical system? It is not just a one-step process, write some code and design. As madam has taught you, you first need to model. So to be a bit more elaborate, you have a 3-step process in general: modeling, design and analysis. You first you first have a rough idea of the cyber system that you're going to design. That means you know how you want the lift to be controlled. That you know that English language statement, through an English language statement, you can say how you want the lift to be controlled. So from that rough idea which you have in mind, it has to be formally represented on the computer, and that is the purpose of modeling. So modeling is the process of gaining a deeper understanding of the system through imitation. Models express what a system does or should do. So it is therefore the specification. So it is the specification. So model provide the specification of the system. What do you want the system to do? How do you want the system to behave? That representation in a formal mechanism, for example, as can tells. And why is the name model and how is it different from a physical system? It nicely abstracts out unnecessary details which you don't want to bother at the current system for the physical plant of the physical plant. You want to model only the desired properties, so that you have already seen how you do that. Now, given the model or the specification, then you come into design and analysis, which is the part which we will be concentrating in this part of the course. So what is design? Design is the structured creation of artifacts. It specifies how a system does what it does. That means that given you are given the model or the specification, you don't tell how that system is going to be implemented. You just tell what that behavior should be. Now that to get to that how, you need to have code corresponding to the specification. That code has to run on processors, has to communicate with the communication medium. You have to have correct scheduling strategies in place for both the communication medium and and the processing platform. And see, all these are artifacts that you are associating with this specification. Specification told what? Now you are saying use this hardware platform, this hardware processor, artifact. Use this communication medium, artifact. Use this communication protocol, artifact. Use this scheduling algorithm, artifact. Use this memory, artifact. Now the combination of this what and the artifacts give you the overall design. So the specification, when mapped to this on these set of artifacts, give you the complete design. So design is the structured creation of artifacts, and therefore it is able to say how a system does what it does. Now how, getting the answer of how is also not the complete thing. We have to also be able to say that whatever I have designed, is it performing correctly? Is it performing up to the expectation? So that process is the job of analysis. So analysis is the process of gaining a deeper understanding of the system through dissection. It specifies why a system does what it does. At the end of this, after design, we will look into analysis part as well. It specifies why a system does what it does or fails to do what a model says it should do. So you have specified that the system should behave here in a certain way. The lift should stop when it comes at say floor number 3, but due to a bug in the processor, the signal missing, the signal not going to the actuation not happening correctly due to a missing signal, the lift does not stop on the 3rd floor. So therefore there is a problem with the how. So you have also designed the how, but there is a problem with the how. Now you have to analyze and find out that there is a signal that is missing. So therefore you are gaining a deeper understanding of the system through dissection, and therefore it is part of the analysis. Okay, with this introduction, we go into the input of what we want to study, hardware software partitioning. Okay. Are you in slide number 4 with me? Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Of course.
fine. So now, what does your model ultimately give me? So firstly, as I said, you have a rough idea of the system that you want to design in mind in English or in your mother tongue. It's just a rough sketch of the what you want to design, and then you come up with models in terms of state machines, and from those models you generate such task graphs. So this is the task graph of an adaptive cruise control system, that what we want, what we had studied. It has sense, and now you have models for each of these blocks. After this comes as the output of modeling. So you already have models for each of these blocks, and then you generate. So these are different tasks. You have certain sensor tasks. So these are sensors. Now after this sensing node, so sensing also does some computation and calculates what you want to sense in the way the digital output. It sends the speed, and then it comes up with a number that gives you the speed. So what does this task graph do in general? So what is this doing? It is measuring all the speeds of all the four wheels of the car, and then from that it is finding out the yaw rate, and it is also finding out the current speed. So the yaw rate tells what is the amount of swivel left and right. So yaw, pitch, and roll. So roll is so what we are concerned about. So understand yaw. So yaw is the left and right swivel. Now, if the four wheels of the car are not exactly at the same speed, what will happen is it will swivel a bit. So it senses the swivel. It also senses the current speed. It senses if there is an object in front and speed, and then the current throttle position of the car. So all this it senses, the lateral acceleration, hand wheel position, road wheel position, all this it calculates, and then it has computation tasks. So these are the computation tasks. It performs these computation tasks, and then it, after computation, it performs actuation. So this whole thing gives a task graph, and such a task graph is taken as input to the hardware software co-design problem. So you have modeled, you have broken the system into functionalities. For each functionality you have models, and that functionality along with the interconnection structure gives you the task graph. So this one says that these are sensor tasks. This sensor tasks takes produces output to this yaw rate computation task. The yaw rate computation task computes and produces the output, which is taken as input by the desired braking force task, right? So a task graph gives the computation as well as the interconnection between those computations. The output of task 1 should go to which task. So this information is given by the task graph. The specification also tells that this whole computation must repeat every 150 milliseconds. So which says that the anti-lock braking system, this cyber system, must repeat and sense every 150 milliseconds, compute what is required, and produce actuations every 150 milliseconds. This is what it says. Now, given this input, let us see. So we talked about what design is. This is what, again, we are just saying that, you see, this design, we got the task graph, and from that task graph we essentially say how we implement it. For example, we are saying here that let us say you have a task graph with 5 tasks, of which task 1 and task 2 is being implemented on a general purpose processor. Task 3 is being implemented as as a, as a custom hardware unit. Task 5 is also implemented as a custom hardware unit. Task 4 is implemented on a co-processor, say a GPU, according to what its functionalities are and where it executes best. So this is the first structured artifacts that you got, this general purpose processor, co-processor, these subsystems you got. And then You also saw that based on the communication structure that these processors and these tasks inside these processors will communicate through this communication network. Because this is a shared communication medium, multiple tasks may content for the same communication medium, and therefore you need communication scheduling. Because you have multiple tasks on the same processor, you need task scheduling, because multiple tasks will be contending for the same processor. There could be complex pipeline structures, complex processors with different types of pipelining and out of order execution, and therefore you have to we have to very carefully find out what should we choose so that my performance goals are met, right? So this is what design talks about. Now, given the design, we told we do analysis. For example, let us say we did this. For example, let us say that we did this design. Now, does this design and let us say this ensures this design is for the adaptive cruise control system, and I'm saying that every 150 milliseconds you need to have you need to generate one output, and therefore you require how many samples per second? 1 by 150 milliseconds, so 1000 by 150, right? So 100 by 15. So a control system acquires, so therefore the control system, which is our adaptive cruise control system here, a control system acquires data at the rate of n samples per second. Can we ensure that each data item will be processed in less than 1 by n seconds? So analysis will provide answers to this. Because you have used different types of artifacts, processors, communication medium, different protocols, in the presence of all these systems, am I being able to maintain the desired performance, desired behavior? That answer will be provided through analysis. So it will give us the answer to the to questions like this. Can we ensure that each data item will always be processed in less than 1 by n seconds? This will come through analysis. Okay. Now let us start what we were supposed to learn here in this. So what do we have? We have this task graph, and we need to implement this task graph on let us say either dedicated hardware or software. This is what this question. This is what the answer we want to find out. Now, maybe I have said this before as well. What are the pros and cons of executing tasks in software and hardware? Software execution of a task is much more flexible than hardware execution. But software execution typically is much less efficient than hardware execution. Why? Why is software execution flexible? Because software execution means you will implement the software or task of a certain task in this task graph as a C code and or Python code, and implement and then compile it for a certain processor and execute the machine code on that particular processor. That is all software execution is about. But however, hardware is what you are going to design a circuit, and you are going to implement that circuit on a hardware chip for that functionality. So so if this is what you are doing for the software case, you can just change, you can have a scheduling algorithm, and at time 1 you can run one software code of task 1, and then you can replace it with software code 2 of task 2. So it is just replacing, having a scheduler and replace who and just determining who executes on the CPU at what time. So therefore it is very flexible. However, if you have designed a digital circuit, it is completely rigid. You cannot have any other functionality on that chip because it's a customized digital circuit or a circuit, and that has been implemented in the form of a hardware. So it is not flexible, because you can have certain reconfigurations, but you cannot use the same hardware to do multiple things again and again. However, we must understand that hardware execution is much more performance efficient, energy efficient. Why? Because you have a customized circuit which is performing only that functionality against software execution for which you have designed a machine code. For that machine code, you will essentially have micro operations. For those micro operations, you will have hardware functional units, and it only has a limited number of limited number of functional units. And all tasks must go on executing using the same set of by multiplexing, or say but through a permutation of only the instructions that you have in the instruction set. So essentially, only by using the limited number of functional units that you have in a general purpose processor, you are executing everything. So therefore, your code is not customized for that particular function. Your processor is not customized for that particular function, and hence your performance will be much lower in terms of hardware. But what you gain again is flexibility. Also, in addition, what you gain is, for example, you can have easy updates. For example, if you have implemented a code in software, you can automatically update that software over the internet. Let us say you have a mobile phone and you go for software updates of different apps that you have. So why can you have that? Because those apps are in software and you just have to fire the auto updates on. But if you had a hardware chip for a certain app, you wouldn't be able to update that so easily. But then why is hardware chips or hardware functionality then necessary? Because some of these functionalities are very performance critical. Suppose that I need a heavy video frames that must be processed, that for which I need 30 frames per second. And the frames are really heavy. The data content of each frame is really heavy. So you need a lot of video processing to be done on each of these frames. Now, if you have 30 frames per second, then one frame must be processed. Every frame must be processed within 1/30 seconds, which is around, what is the time? 1/30 seconds. So around, let us say, around 33, right? 30, right? So around 33 milliseconds. So every 33 milliseconds, you must be able to support. You must be able to process one frame. Now, to do that, it may be that software execution is not efficient enough to do that. So sometimes you need hardware coders, encoders for, say, videos to be processed. So although you could have the same encoders and decoders in software, but often you do that in hardware, because software execution is incapable of doing such fast calculations with the efficiency that is required. And hence you require to find, based on performance requirements, based on the constraints that you have, you may need to execute some of your tasks in your task graph in hardware, some of your tasks in software, some may, which is a mix, means somewhat between hardware. You can have different types of processors on which your software code can execute. So this whole problem of mapping the functionality into different types of platforms that you have is called hardware software partitioning or hardware software co-design. So what do you do essentially in this? For each of these codes, what do you do? You have first thought you will implement some of your tasks in software, some of your tasks in hardware. You have found that out in your task graph. Now, given that behavior, so the behavior is your task graph, you partition that, and you have a software part. You have decided that some of these tasks you will execute in software, some of your tasks will execute in hardware. For the software part, you will do a compilation, because if you have C programs for it, and because you have a behavior, from that behavior, you have learned modeling, so you know that you can automatically generate C codes or even hardware description language, VHDL, Verilog codes from it, from the same model, automatically generate. So for the hardware part, you could do a high level synthesis. right? To get a gate level design, a gate level behavior. Now, when you have a gate level design corresponding to a functionality, you have fairly good estimates of how much hardware area this particular functionality is going to take, how much energy in hardware it is going to consume, right? So so you partition the tasks, then you determine some in hardware, some in software. For the software you compile, for the hardware you do for the hardware you do a high level synthesis, and then you do a co-simulation. You do a co-simulation to find out whether your performance requirements and the correctness are satisfied or not. If they're satisfied, you stop. Otherwise, you loop back and get a different partition. That means some of the tasks which you thought should be implemented in software are performance hungry, and therefore you cannot meet the end design goals of the system if you implement those tasks in software. So now you have to find that out, which of these tasks should be implemented in hardware, and then go back and then again do a resimulation. So this will repeat. This process is going to repeat until you have a satisfactory design where you will stop, right? So this is what is hardware software co-design. Now, how does the approach go about? Right. So what are the inputs to the hardware software co-design problem? You have available hardware, processors, DSPs, FPGAs, whatever hardware components you have different communication buses, protocols. So all hardware things that you have, you put inside this target technology that you have as input. And then you have design constraints. Design constraints related to power, area, delay, capital expenditure, etc. For example, capital expenditure, why is it so important? Because again, for hardware software co-design, because hardware implementation is costly. Why? Because you require big design teams to do this hardware design, and then it has to be fabricated, packaged, and then you will obtain it as a chip. And this is a long process. Its time to market is high. Its expenditure required to design that chip is high. So only when a particular functionality is going to be implemented on let us say lakhs of devices, and it is extremely performance hungry, only then you go for hardware design. Otherwise, you go for software design, for which you can say that you will have multiple software tasks on the same processor running, and you can just replace one software by the another. It's just getting a C program, compiling and executing. This is what is software. So it is much less costly compared to hardware design. So therefore, depending on what are your design constraints with related to performance in terms of power, area, delay, and let us say constraints with respect to capital expenditure. So depending on, so these will be taken as input, and finally you will have the input specification given, say, as a hierarchical and concurrent finite state machine, HCFSM. So that this model, which we obtain here as the task graph. So this is what your inputs are. Given these inputs, you do a hardware software co-design. This is another small example where you have a specification. The specification is obtained as a task graph like this. And here this has 3 sensor inputs, I1, I2, I3. And then it has these 5 tasks, FCT1, FCT3, 2, 4. These are the 5 tasks. And let us say you have decided that functionality 2 and functionality 4 you will implement in processor 1. Functionality 1 and functionality 3 you will implement in processor 2. And functionality 5 is very performance hungry and you must implement it in hardware. The specification for this mapping, the specification also gives you certain other things. The requirement, for example, that this function must complete execution end-to-end time delay for this function. This constraint is there. So inputs to specify design constraints. I told you this is such a design constraint that the end-to-end time delay for this function is at most 22765 nanoseconds. It also says that functionality 4 can only begin after 5,000 nanoseconds have passed subsequent to the generation of output of functionality 1. Such specifications will be provided as part of the modeled task graph that you get, and based on that you will obtain a hardware software partitioning like this. Okay. So now to go on into detail of what are the hardware software partitioning steps. As I told you, you obtain the internal graph representation or the model task graph. You generate, you translate the behavior of each node of this task graph into hardware description language and C, both C or Python, some software language, high level language, and a hardware description language. So both you need to do. Then for each of those nodes, you compile as well as do hardware synthesis. So compile all C programs for the target processors available. Then you obtain the resulting program size. Let us say it will give you an estimation of the resulting execution time. And for all the hardware description language codes. So for the same task, remember you are generating both the C program and the hardware description language, because you want to get an estimate of both the hardware cost and the software cost for each node. So you have got an estimate of the software execution cost for each program, for each task node through this compilation process. And for each of these nodes, you have obtained an estimate of the hardware cost through this synthesis process. So synthesize hardware components to a high level synthesis just to obtain estimate of the hardware cost. A high level synthesis or a gate level synthesis is sufficiently fast enough to get an estimate. So you don't need to actually implement it as a chip to understand what you will do. You will partition in hardware or software. You just need an estimation, fairly good estimate. So now, given this hardware cost and the software cost for each task node, you also, in addition to this, so through this compilation process and the synthesis process, you have obtained the hardware cost and the software cost of each task node. Now, this is not all. You also need objective functions. What do you want? That means, as I said, you may want an objective function which is a combination of the area, delay, power, cost, etc. to be optimized. So that will be given by objective functions of the partition. So what is the objective of partitioning? Right. So multiple metrics such as cost, power, and performance are weighted against one another. So what is an objective function? An expression combining multiple metric values into a single value that defines the quality of a partition is called an objective partition. So now, what is an objective function? You have done a partition. How good that partition is. To find numerically, to get a numerical answer to how good a partition is, you need an objective function. An objective function will weigh multiple things and give you a single numeric value. So it is saying that the returned numeric value by such a function is called cost. So this is called the cost. This numeric value of the objective function is called the cost of partitioning. What is the cost or quality of partitioning? And that is a weighted sum. That is a weighted sum objective. That is a weighted sum of, let us say, multiple constraints. So the objective function could be a weighted sum of area, delay, and power. So let us say you have three constraints, k1 plus k2 plus k3, such that k1 plus k2 plus k3 equals to 1. So you know how much of the weight will be taken by area, how much of the weight will be taken by delay, and how much of the weight will be taken by power. Now, given each of, let us say, area, you will find out how good the partition is in terms of the area, hardware area, let us say. And therefore, how do you obtain that? You obtain that using a function again. That function weights two things. You have a current area for that partition, and you have an area constraint. For example, the delay, you have a current end-to-end delay and you have a delay constraint. So how does the partition do? How well does the partition perform in terms of the delay with respect to the delay constraint will be returned by this function. Similarly for power, and then all these three taken together gives you the overall objective function. Now, given an overview of all these, we first look, before going into solving an optimization problem, we first look into, let us say, how these parameters, let us say area, delay, power, how will you determine these parameters? Let us say we take one of these parameters and try to dig down in a bit more detail as to how do you determine the delay corresponding to a certain piece of code. And let us say that this piece of code, which is say functionality n1, has multiple subfunctions in it. It calls n2, n3, and n4 to complete. Okay. The internal computation time of each of these functions are referred to as ICT. So n2.ict refers to the internal computation time. That means the time taken by the codes, by the code of this inside this function to execute, right? And then in addition to this, you also have TT, which is transmission time, and we'll see how it is used, and ET, which gives you the total execution time. So firstly, if you come, if you see this, you see that n4 is an independent function, it calls nobody. N2 is also an independent function, it calls nobody. So the execution time of n2 can be obtained by only the internal computation time of n2. Similarly, the execution time of n4 can be computed only by the internal computation time of n4. However, if you look into n3, so this is the n3 code. What does n3 do? It has a while loop. It calls n4, and there is an end loop. So all these statements, execution of all these statements consume time, and which is given by ICT. So ICT is the computation time taken to execute all these statements. But it has some other things as well. The execution of these statements inside n3 is not all. It has to consider, because it calls n4, to complete n3, you require to complete n4. So therefore, execution time of n4 will be there inside the execution time of n3. Now, to call n4, you need transmission, because if we see this is n3. Now n3 calls n4. N3 calls n4. If n3 calls n4, it is sending some data as input to n4. Based on that, n4 is computing something. So therefore, so what you have, you require transmission time. Transmission time for the output of n3 to pass to some data from n3 to pass to n4. So see how we are calculating the execution time of n3. How are we calculating? Firstly, the internal computation time of n3 plus e4.frec. That means if this is a loop, n3 calls n4 multiple times. So e4.frec gives me the number of times n3 calls n4. That is e4.frec. For each of these times, so e4.frec times, for each of these times, it must incur a transmission time e4.tt. And for each of these times, not only the transmission time, it must also execute the n4 function, which is given by n4.et. n4.et we have already found out in this step. So therefore, the total execution time of n3 will be given by this. And what is e4.tt? e4.transmission time, if you dig a bit more detail into this, so e4.tt is given by, so e4 will be implemented by a bus, the bus delay multiplied by, so bus delay gives you the propagation delay on the bus, into ei.bits divided by bus width. So ei.bits is the total size of the data. Bus width tells me how many bits in parallel I can send. So number of transmissions that I will require for one time, one means one, so a data amount, a data chunk to move from N3 to N4, number of transmissions that I will require is EI dot bits divided by bus width. This one gives me the number of transmission I require to send one chunk of data. And each time I send this, I will incur a delay which is given by the bus delay. So EI.tt gives me the total delay I will require on the bus for transmitting one chunk of data. So this is E4.tt here, and N4.et is the execution time, and this total gives me the overhead, total overhead of calling N4 from N3. So this gives me the total execution time of N3. Similarly, very similarly, I can find out the execution time of N1. So how can I find out the execution time of N1? The internal computation time of N1 plus number of times E1 N1 calls N2, which is E1.frec, into E1.tt into N2.et, plus number of times N1 calls N4, which is E2.frec into E2.tt plus N4.et, plus the number of times N1 calls N3, E3.frec into E3.tt plus N3.et. Yes. Any confusions up to this? Because now I will shift to the optimization part of it. So this is the introduction to hardware software partitioning I have completed. Now I will go into how do you optimize a partition? How do you solve a given hardware software partitioning problem? Do you have any questions? You can ask me till now if you have any questions. Hello, yes, no, hearing. Hello, are you there with me? Anybody?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. So let us take our very first optimization problem on hardware software partitioning. So firstly, we will consider that we are not given a task graph. We are given an independent set of tasks for the first problem at hand. Now, for each of these tasks, for each task node, Ti, I have a hardware area cost, Hi, I have found out through hardware synthesis, and I have a software execution cost, Si. Okay. Let us say I have a variable Yi. This binary decision variable Yi equals to 1 if Ti is implemented in software and Yi equals to 0 otherwise. That means if Ti is implemented in hardware, I have I use the decision variable Y, means I make the decision variable 0. If Ti is implemented in software, I have the decision variable as 1. Now you see that if I have n tasks, first see that if I have n tasks, each distinct valuation of these yi values gives me a solution. That means I can have y1 equals to 1, y2 equals to 1, y3 equals to 0, y4 equals to 0, y5 equals to 0, y6 equals to 1. So these 0, 1 valuations, the combination of these 0, 1 value combinations of these n tasks gives me a distinct solution. Right? Gives me a distinct solution. So how many different solutions are possible? I have two options for each task. So I have 2 to the power n different solutions. So immediately you can see that the number of possible solutions is exponential in the number of tasks, right? So if you have n tasks, you can have 2 to the power n possible solutions, hardware software partitioning solutions. Now let us say the problem that you are trying to solve, the initial problem that you are trying to solve is this, that I want to minimize the total hardware area cost. I want to minimize the total hardware area cost subject to the fact that the total software execution cost, execution time cost will be will be limited by upper bounded by capital D. So you have a single processor. So all tasks are executing one by one on that processor. So the total software execution cost will be summation of, so yi, what does yi.si give me? Yi is equals to 1 if the task is implemented in software. So yi.si is the summation. So summation yi.si is the summation of the software execution cost of all tasks which are implemented in software. So yi is 1 again for only all those tasks which is implemented in software. For them yi will be equal to 1 in a given solution. So in that particular solution, if I want to find out what is the total software execution cost, I will have summation yi by si. Now, if yi equals to 1, I said that if I'm executing in hardware, I have yi equals to 0. So for all tasks that are executing in hardware, for them 1 is yi. So summation over 1 minus yi dot hi gives me the total hardware area cost of the tasks that are implemented in hardware. Okay, is the problem clear and easy? Any confusion? No, yes? Are you
No, sir.
hearing? No, sir. Thank you. Okay. Now, given such a problem, I understand that I have been able to impress upon you that this problem is complex in the sense that the number of possible optimal solutions is exponential in the number of tasks that you have, the number of inputs that you have, the number of input tasks that you have. And I have no straightforward way of finding the optimal solution. Any one of these 2 to the power n solutions could be the optimal solution. I do not have any greedy mechanism of doing that. Now, when I have such a problem in which I do not have any greedy mechanism of solving optimally, and I have a solution space or the number of possible solutions which is exponential in the number of inputs that I have, tasks that I have, I typically say that my problem is NP complete. I am not going into the technical definition of NP completeness, but understand these two things, that my number of possible optimal solutions is exponential in the number of inputs, very similar to the problem that I have. For that, you must appreciate internally that any one of these 2 to the power n, some could be more likely, some could be less likely, but for this hardware software partitioning problem, where you have two different things, each task has a hardware cost and each task has a software cost, and you have a certain hardware area and a certain software execution cost bound, and I want to minimize the hardware area given the software execution cost bound, which of these tasks should be implemented in software such that the bound will be less than capital D and the hardware area consumed will be minimized? It is not easy. It is not very easy to find. Why am I not saying impossible? Because I don't know whether P equals to NP. If you understand that term, if you don't understand, does not matter. What I want to mean is that there is no possible easy solution to way of finding out which of the tasks should be implemented in software so that the hardware area cost of the other task, of the remaining task, will be minimized. There is no easy way of finding this. Such problems are called NP complete or NP hard problems. I am not going into again the technical details, but we are considering those problems and trying to find solution approaches to such complex problems. Now, given such complex problems, there are 3 typical ways in which people try to solve them. First, optimal solution. Many ways are there, but 2 typical ways are: formulate the problem as a constraint satisfaction problem and use a constraint satisfaction problem solver. For example, generate an ILP, integer linear program, and use an ILP solver like IBM Simplex. Use an SMT solver, formulate that as SMT constraints, software modular theory constraints, and then and then yeah, satisfiability modular theory problems and solve them using an SMT solver. Or you use or you design that problem, or you map that problem as a state space search problem. For each such optimization problems, you can generate a corresponding state space. We will see how to generate that, and you can solve using a search technique. Okay, for example, one such search technique is branch and bound, which we will study now next. You can also have hardware fast solutions to it. For example, when you so the one of the drawbacks of optimal solutions is that it may take a very long time to generate a solution. Also, solutions could be so less scalable that you cannot generate a solution, it will just crash it. You cannot generate a solution on the hardware that is available with you, because the state space size inside will the number of problems that you need to evaluate concurrently will be so high that it will be that your computer will be incapable to hold it inside its RAM at a given time, and there will be a lot of crashing, leading to a very long time to generate solutions. And the number of possible solutions being very high, it will also take a very long time to execute and generate a solution. So both due to memory as well as the computation overhead, sometimes it may be infeasible to generate optimal solutions. Also, sometimes it so happens that this optimization problem is part of a bigger design problem, and that design problem needs to go through several iterations to generate a good solution. So if you solve this small problem optimally, which takes a long time, so that entire design process cycle gets hampered. So you may often need to generate quick, good solutions, which may not be optimal, but are satisfactorily good, sufficiently good. For those cases, you use heuristic fast solutions, which do not give you optimal solutions, but are useful when overhead for optimal solution is unacceptable. Good heuristics often provide near optimal solutions. We will see one good solution, this heuristic fast solution to the hardware software partitioning problem. There could also be stochastic solutions, which are statistical solutions, meaning that given the same input, if you run this algorithm 2 times, it may not give you the same output. It will statistically give you similar kind of output given sufficient amount of time to execute, but it will not give you. So when do you use a heuristic fast solution against when do you use a stochastic solution? When your structure of the problem, how the problem works internally, we will see what I mean by this in more detail when I go into this. When the structure of the problem is more or less known to you, you may often like to go for a heuristic fast solution. But if your structure of the problem, how do you get to a good solution quickly, if that is not very nicely known to you, but you do not want to generate an optimal solution because it will be very costly, you often go for a stochastic solution. Typical examples are genetic algorithm, simulated annealing, particle swarm optimization, etc. So these are all stochastic solutions. We will see one particular example of stochastic solution techniques as well, which is simulated annealing. So with this introduction, we are out of time today. So your next class, so we stop here today. So we will next, what we are going to embark upon is, we are going to see how a branch and bound solution to this problem will work, and then go on subsequently to the heuristic fast solutions, etc. We could not start the problem today. We will. It's sort of good because next day I think we have class in Monday, right? Class on Monday, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So that class will be a 2-hour class, and we will be able to complete our first this optimal solution strategy, the discussion of that nicely within 2 hours. So that's good in a way. So next class is Monday evening, 8 o'clock. Right?
Yes.
Thanks for today. Today, this is it. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Bye, sir. Yes, sir.